Hey everyone! Great to be back with you all again. I was looking for a good opportunity to make another book review, and with John Romero's upcoming book, Doom Guy: Life in First Person, coming out pretty soon, I thought it would be a great time to brush up on the history we knew so far in David Kushner's Masters of Doom. Since its release in 2003, Masters of Doom was considered to be THE book on the history of John Carmack, John Romero, their partners, and their creations. While being an important resource in getting the story straight from the Johns themselves, the book was also considered to be very entertaining, and got compared to the writing style of a good drama. Does it still warrant that level of praise now? Have a seat. Let's talk. I'll start by saying that the task for writing a book like this was downright Herculean. Writing up a proper history approved by both of the Johns, especially after their falling out with each other, must have taken a ridiculous amount of work to get right. Going all the way from their childhood to 2003, this book had a lot of ground to cover and a lot of technology to discuss. And this book covers a fairly large amount of it, in a format that's pretty easy to digest. We go from the Johns' upbringing and their lack of computers, to their time with companies like SoftDisk and Apogee, to the formation of id Software, and beyond. If you ever watched my videos on the Dangerous Dave and Commander Keen games, you may notice that a large amount of the info I pulled on those games' histories actually came from this very book. Well, that was no fluke. I really learned a lot about the creation of both of those series of games, thanks to the insight provided here. I and many others would have likely never known about Dangerous Dave and copyright infringement, the demo that would lead to the creation of Commander Keen, and the Super Mario Bros. 3 demo that the team would create and later pitch to Nintendo in the hopes of starting up a PC game market with them. But all of that covers just about 1/4 of the story. No, the majority of this book focuses on the development behind Wolfenstein 3D, the Doom games, Quake, and other important parts of id Software's history. And the details behind these projects are also talked about here to an extent. I have to give Kushner some serious credit here. Most writers would simply gloss over some of the more detailed aspects of these game development processes, but Kushner actually went through the task of trying to describe some of these techniques and challenges, to the point where a layperson could actually understand them. And I'd say he mostly succeeded. I don't believe anyone outside of John Carmack himself could fully understand and explain the engines he created, and the challenges he encountered while developing them, obviously. But thanks to Kushner, I at least felt like I had a basic understanding of them, and for me that went a long way. It also helped answer a few questions I always had running in my head, like, for example, why the duo never ended up working for a big company like Sierra before going a different route. And this book managed to actually answer that very question, so kudos. Writing a book on this type of subject matter can be tricky. If you write it in too basic of a sense, then people will find it uninteresting or lacking in detail. But if you include too much detail and make things overly complicated, then it can push your audience even further away. There's an art form to reaching the largest amount of people possible here, and I do believe the book managed to do that, so again, good, not an easy feat. It also provided some of the more uncomfortable information regarding the duo. When they say don't meet your heroes, I could easily see multiple ways it could have applied here. I won't go into too many specifics, but as someone who's pretty new to this whole parenting thing, I was quite shocked to hear about how devoted these two went, to the level of even giving up on previous families, relationships, children, etc. On one hand, I can't say this level of dedication wasn't necessarily required to create these now legendary games, but on the other, the thought of essentially leaving my family to pursue something just isn't a level I'd ever be willing to go. Perhaps you could argue that this is why they became so successful in a way that someone like me didn't and likely never will, but I don't know. The whole thing rubbed me in the wrong way regardless. The part about John Carmack taking his cat to an animal shelter, likely causing it to be put to sleep, all because he felt it was having a negative impact on his life, was also pretty heartbreaking to read. And the author isn't exactly innocent when it comes to his brand of humor either. I understand we're talking about a book from 2003 and that the climate has obviously changed quite a bit since then, but it's hard not to be irked by at least some of Kushner's choices of words here. The part about Carmack's cat that I mentioned before, the writing pretty much played this part up for laughs, which was extremely awkward. He also made a lot of offhand jokes here and there that allude to Carmack being on the autistic spectrum. Whether it's true or not, the whole thing came across as really tasteless to me. And although it's brief, there is some transphobic language concerning American McGee's mother dating a trans person at one point in the book, and it does come off very crass in its approach. If that does or doesn't matter to you, then so be it, but I feel it was important to mention it being there for those who don't want to be caught off guard later. I think there also may have been a missed opportunity in talking about the way that gaming culture was affected by some of these games, both the positive and the negative sense, and whether that was done intentionally to remain in the good graces of the people that the book was written about, I'm not entirely sure. But still, what could have been? I suppose the only other thing I could think of to talk about critically here would be how accurate all of this story actually is, as some parts do come off a little larger than life and Hollywoodish at times. In that sense, we may never really know, as with most books of its type, we're simply going by the words of some of the people behind it without much of any other context. The pieces are all certainly there and fit well enough together to make sense of it all, with some interviews to back it all up, but I wouldn't be surprised if there were a few fabrications here and there, which is fine. With all of that said, like it or not, this was, and is, still currently the best book on the history of id and its founders on the market, and contains a wealth of valuable and essential information that diehards, and even those simply curious about the company's background, would be foolish not to delve into. Just understand that you may not necessarily like everything you get out of it. But then again, isn't that just life itself? And that's going to do it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. Have you read this book before yourself, or perhaps read or watched any kind of documentary or gotten some other info on the Johns themselves? Let me know your thoughts here in the comments below. And if you're feeling generous, please consider supporting my Patreon, where awesome people like CLO, Brandon, Erica, and Jedi Dude all help to keep this channel going. Until next time, my friends.